Around this town, lady up around this town, victory on the battleground, we claim it now. Lady up, lady up, lady up, lady up.
Welcome to the Lady Up America podcast. I'm Diane Canada, your host. I'm so glad you're here today. Today is Tuesday. It is April 2nd, and we are talking today about how to grade an American president. Be right back. All right, ladies, how do we grade the American president? We see polling numbers, like a lot of times we'll see these polling numbers and it'll show where people are approving or disapproving, but that's not really a grade, right? That's not really a measuring stick. That's just sort of based on emotions, where that pollster caught that person that particular day when they called. We need to zoom out, in my opinion, and look at this from a much more important level, I think. Now, I know we are all tired of the doom and gloom. We're tired of the barrage of breaking news cycles. We're tired of all of our neighbors and friends just pitted against each other. We're all tired of that. So when we hear somebody talking about love and unity and optimism, it's like this woo, 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 right? We're like really drawn into that. But I want you today to snap out of that. Okay. I want you to zoom out with me. Let's get off the field for a minute. Let's go up into the nosebleed seats and let's look at this from 30,000 feet. Okay. We need to be able to, first of all, identify what does it mean to be an American? Then what does it mean to be an American president? And then how does that all line up with what's going on in our current reality? Like, that's what I think we really need to come back to. We need to get our center again. We need to get our true north again. So for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I teach very, very often on the 7 conservative values of America, which basically are laced, integrated all throughout our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution. They basically were the framework for what the founders used to build our republic in such a way where they set us up for success, where we weren't going to be susceptible to crumbling like other great nations had in centuries past. They had this enormous responsibility to set us up so that we could maintain our republic and that it wouldn't fall, especially from within. They understood the temptations of man, the frailties of the human existence, and they wanted to insulate us from such things. So I'm going to be teaching this over the next 4 sessions. Over the next 4 sessions on those 7 conservative values. Because I think even though I talk about them a lot in workshops and things like that, I want to really break them down, because this is how we can then grade the American president that is in office right now. And then we can see how to then gauge the effectiveness of presidents that will come after him. All right, so let's look at it. Today, I want to break down 2 of our conservative values: limited government and individual freedom. Okay, I think these kind of go hand in hand. I mean, they're all complementary to each other. We have 7, but I think these 2 really go hand in hand. And I want to remind you again that these 7 values came from Speaker Mike Johnson's website, is where I found them several years ago when I was first building Lady Up America. I didn't know he was going to become our Speaker of the House at the time. And I know that a lot of us have some competing views about how he's doing as a speaker, but let's set all of that political stuff aside for just a minute, because I think that these 7 values are what we aim for. This is the soul of our nation. And I always refer to them as the 7 load-bearing walls of our country. When we look at HGTV and we look at homes that are being renovated, the first thing we look for are the load-bearing walls. We don't want those to come down, because if they do, the whole roof can cave in, right? The house is not stable. These are the 7, and you'll find them interwoven again throughout all of our founding documents. So I want to take a look at limited government today and individual freedom. All right, so let's break these 2 down. The definition of limited government, according to these 7 conservative values, is that the bigger the government, the smaller our individual liberties. A legitimate government operates only by the consent of the governed and is more efficient and less corrupt when it is limited in its size and scope. Our Constitution provides important safeguards against government encroachment, a vital separation of powers, and a necessary system of checks and balances. Okay, so hold that thought for a sec. We're going to break that down. Now let's look at individual freedom. In America, we proclaim the self evident truths that all of us are created equal and granted by God the same inherent freedoms, such as the natural and unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the ability to pursue happiness, our own property, to build wealth, and defend ourselves and our families. The purpose of government is to secure these rights, not grant them. There's a very big difference. All right, so let's break this down. Now, limited government, the founding fathers knew, just as it said in here, that the bigger the government gets, the less free we are. That's the big takeaway. The bigger government gets, the less free we are. You grow that monster bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it'll turn on you and devour you. So, in order for us to not have a big government that's encroaching in everything that we do, we have to be trusted to be self governed. So, in other words, we have to be willing and able to discipline ourselves, to have boundaries in our own life. And who sets those? Well, the founding fathers knew that that was God. Obviously, that was God. God sets those boundaries. When they were setting up our Constitution, even our Declaration of Independence, but certainly when we got into the articles of the Constitution, the founding fathers were extremely clear. There's quote after quote after quote that I'll share with you maybe in another show, but you can go on the Lady Up America app and get all these right now. But there are so many quotes from our founding fathers that basically all in agreement. They all knew that without morality, that the government would be completely unsustainable. They weren't saying that you had to necessarily be a Christian to live here, although the majority of Americans were. But we just were all agreeing on one moral compass for a society, and that was God, based on Judeo-Christian values, the Ten Commandments, the what the Bible, the parameters and the boundaries that the Bible puts around human beings. So, in other words, if you knew that you had to answer to God, if God's watching in all of your private moments, if you have an opportunity to do something sneaky or something wrong and you know that God's watching, you're going to correct, you're going to usually discipline yourself because you know that you don't want to disappoint God. And when we have godly men who then create godly families, that's the best government structure that there is. It's the best hierarchy. God is the absolute authority in the house. The husband is answering to God, and he knows that he needs to love his wife and his children as God loved the church, right? So he can be trusted then to be the spiritual authority in his home. And then women, it's not about submitting in an oppressive sense. It's more about a respect and a reverence for the fact that the man is the spiritual authority in the home. She influences him, and she has certainly a right to share her opinion, and she can speak up when she needs to, all of that. But she submits to that authority. And then the children also are disciplined because all of that authority then trickles down. What happens in the home spills out on the city streets. So our founding fathers knew, obviously, the best governing structure was within the home and within a spiritual household. Now, did everybody abide by that? No, of course not. That's why there have to be laws. That's why there have to be governmental rules, but they should be limited. There should be like the last resort. People should be able to be trusted to govern themselves. So, this is where we get the concept of one moral compass for a society. This is why coexisting is really a slippery slope. Because if what I think is right based on a biblical worldview is in contrast to what you think is right based on some other worldview, then who's the umpire? How can we have a sustainable society when we can't agree on what's right and wrong? And this is what we see playing out in our culture, and I'll bring that up here in just a minute. He also said that the government is much less corrupt and much more efficient when it's kept small. Now we have so many bureaucracies that have been built. We have the department of this, the department of that, with all of these, basically all these governing structures within these bodies. They have become very dangerous because now with their lobbyists and with their unwillingness to share information with with the legislative branch and all of this, that we've kind of flipped the tables a little bit, where they kind of tell the legislators what to do rather than having to answer to those legislators. And we saw that play out in COVID, didn't we? We saw that play out so strongly over the last several years. So really, we've kind of, given up a lot of our power in Congress over to these bureaucracies, and they're kind of running things at this point. And this is why our government has become so corrupt. If you talk with the average American out there, they are afraid of the government. And they see the government is so bloated and corrupt. It is so huge. It's expanded so much, which is exactly what our founding fathers were trying to prevent. Now, we understand that in a modern society, our legislators aren't going to understand everything, and there may be a need for these bureaucracies. I'm not saying there's not a need for them, but when the power gets handed over to them, that is the problem. They no longer answer to the legislators. The legislators then basically absolve their power to them, and they are running things. And this is what we see. So that's a problem, and I could do a whole podcast just on that. But that separation of powers and that checks and balances has really been kind of skewed. This is why we see things like committee hearings going on all the time, but yet nothing ever gets done, right? Because the bureaucracies, the FBI, the CIA, all these different bureaucracies, Department of Justice, they're not holding up their end of the deal in a lot of cases. So Congress can only do so much if you have corruption in the bureaucracy in the other areas of power, and they really hold all the power. Then it kind of ties the hands of Congress, and there's not a lot that can get done. They can maybe bring it to the American people. They can make them aware. They can televise these hearings, all of that, maybe move the needle in the hearts and the minds of the American people, which is important. But it has really stripped them of their power when they handed it over to these bureaucracies. Okay, so what happens when limited government starts to break down in a culture, in a country? Well, obviously people aren't self-governing anymore. So they're a lot more prone to crime and violence, seeing what they can get away with, pushing the boundaries, right? The boundaries kind of don't exist anymore. If we don't have one moral compass, we have chaos, right? We have competing agendas for self-gain. We see people becoming their own God. They don't answer to one God. They just want to become their own God. They demand their own way. They have all these demands that they start placing on the people around them. Massively corrupt and highly inefficient government. We definitely see that. I just went over that. We become afraid of our government. We're afraid we're going to be punished. We're going to be arrested. We're going to be jailed. We're going to be ostracized, whatever it is, punishments if you don't follow the narrative, hold up the narrative that the government is selling. And corruption within the power structures. People don't trust the government anymore. So could we say that under this current culture that we're in, that limited government is really being hacked away at by the progressive left? Most definitely, absolutely, yes. All right, what about individual freedom? Let's take a look at that. Now, the takeaway on individual freedom is that government secures our God-given rights. They have no power to grant us rights. They are there to secure our rights that we already have by our Creator. They don't grant rights. They just are there to secure them. Okay, it's a very important distinction. All right, under individual freedom, God gives us the right to life. Like He is the creator of life. He breathes His life into us. Liberty means freedom. We are created beings by Almighty God, and He has a purpose for our lives. And so with that comes freedom to pursue that purpose, which is ultimately the pursuit of happiness. Happiness comes when we fulfill our God-given purpose. That's what everybody's looking for in their life, is identity and purpose. If you break down anything that we're looking at in the news lately, it comes down to those two things, identity and purpose. It's what that's what the young people are desperately searching for right now. Also, under individual freedom, if it starts, when we start to break it down, um, it's the right to defend our lives and our properties and our families. Right now, what we're seeing in so many cases is that the tables are kind of turned again, right? Where we have people that are getting in trouble for defending themselves, their families, and their property. Somehow they are ending up in jail when the perpetrators are walking free. All right. And also, we have the ability to, through meritocracy, to build wealth. So meritocracy means it's based on our merit, based on the willingness, the effort, the work that we put into something. We have the right to achieve things and to enjoy those things in America. If we're willing to put in the work, then we should be willing to enjoy the fruits of those labors. That's the way that individual freedom is supposed to work in America. Now, without individual freedom, let's look at what starts to happen in a culture. We have distorted viewpoints on human rights. Let's just look at the unborn. A lot of people will say to us, ladies, they'll say things like, well, you're pro life, but you're for the death penalty. How do you reconcile that? Well, what God says in the Ten Commandments, when he says, do not kill, what he's saying is, do not murder. Don't intentionally go out to end someone's life. If you're in a self-defense situation, that's a whole different story. But the right to life is for every human being, and we are not to extinguish that life early. So let's just look at this Roe v. Wade, this abortion issue. It is rampant, and that's going to be one of our biggest hurdles this election season, is learning to win people on that subject, which I talk about a lot in my workshops. All right, renaming these human rights, like renaming freedoms, right, to perpetuate a very destructive narrative. So we look at gay rights. We just look at that. We look at reproductive rights. It's kind of like reframing the wording in a way where, again, it's very confusing. If you don't know your true north, it can become very confusing. But we look at all of these trans rights and all these rights that they're trying to now display and kind of cram down our throats. Um, it's a distortion of the intended rights for individual freedom. Loss of rights is what's one of the things that starts to happen when we have, this founding value breaking down. So, like I said, defending yourself and defending your property become not so cut and dry, right? There's all kinds of ways people can spin that to make you look like the perpetrator, to make you look like you're the one in the wrong. Shaming you for building wealth, shaming you. So if you put in all this work, effort, time, money to build something, they think they should just be able to come in and take what you've built and distribute it around to people who've never done anything to earn it. Equal rights under the law are one thing, but equity is a whole different thing. Equity is saying that whatever anyone has, everybody should have the same, no matter if they worked for it or not. So that goes completely against meritocracy, earning it on your merit, and it's a direct violation of individual freedom. So these are just some of the examples that I was just thinking about today on what starts to unravel when we break down these two founding values in our country, these two load-bearing walls. So if we look at the presidency right now, what would we give the presidency, the current administration? How would we grade them on the area of limited government and individual freedom? These two out of the seven very important values in our country. These values are the soul of our nation. This is what our nation was built on over the last over 200 years. This is how America has become so great. But when we start to see an erosion of Christianity, which is the founding moral compass of our society, you don't have to be a Christian to live here, but that's the gauge between right and wrong in our culture. That's how our country was set up. So how do we, when we start to see that unraveling, we start to see people not being so willing to govern themselves. They want to just do what they want. If it feels good, do it. So what? I don't care. I don't care if it hurts you or not. I'm going to do this. I don't care if you like it or not. I'm going to do this. This very self-serving society that we have. I mean, it's just rampant now. Um, and all under the name of compassion. It's such a distortion. The most compassionate thing we can do as human beings is to uphold these seven. The most compassionate thing we can do is to be self-governing, to answer to God, and to be loving. God is very clear about love your neighbor, all of that. There have been people that have distorted religion, have distorted Christianity, and there's always going to be fringe people under any governing structure. You're going to have what they call the far left or the far right or the far out Christians, right? Where there's fringe, but the healthy relationship with Jesus when you're walking out a healthy relationship with him, then you want to please him. You don't want to grieve him. You don't want to grieve the Holy Spirit. So you're going to, when you have an opportunity to cheat, you're going to elect not to, because you know God's watching, and it's not because you fear him. Yes, we do fear him, but it's because we want to serve him. We're so grateful for our lives. We're so grateful for all of the things that he's given us that we want to honor him with our lives. It's a living sacrifice. So we're going to be more self-governing. We're going to live by that moral compass. We're going to we're going to look out for our neighbors and each other. That's just going to come with the territory when you're under a self-governing Christian Judeo worldview. So it is the most compassionate thing that we can do. We help our neighbors. We help those in need, all of that. But this demand that you share everything, and this demand, I mean, I think, should we share? Yes. But this demand, this insatiable demand for everything you've got, that I'm going to have it, that is not of God. All right. So we look at limited government and individual freedom. How would we grade our current president right now? So do we have, let's just look at it. Do we have a society that's high in crime and violence? Yes, absolutely. Do we have boundaries being completely run over? Yes. And if you just look at the southern border, I mean, look at people's homes, look at these squatters coming in people's homes, and from these migrants, these illegal migrants that are here. They're now, you go to the grocery store and your house is empty for an hour. They can move in, and you have to now fight to get them out legally, and it can take months, and they have rights. I mean, what is going on? There's just such a backward, you know, everything just seems so backwards right now. We look at this current presidency. Do we have chaos when it comes to our moral compass? Yes. I mean, there's so many things that this administration is doing. Like, even over the weekend, he made a big deal about trans visibility on Easter Sunday. It infuriated lots and lots and lots of Christians. So people becoming their own God, demanding their own way, demanding that you agree, not only agree, but comply or else. Do we see all that under this administration? Yeah, we do. Do we see massively corrupt and inefficient government? Absolutely. Rule of law, which we're going to get into later, is completely shattered at this point. There's just so much going on. Are we afraid of our government? Are there punishments and consequences if we don't go along with the narrative? Yeah, people are losing their jobs. People had got released from the military if they wouldn't take the vaccine. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on that that where people are afraid of their government at this point. So, and the power structures, they don't trust the government. So we see all of this breaking down under this current administration. If we look over at individual freedom, do we see distorted viewpoints on human rights under the unborn? Who's protecting life and who's protecting killing children? Renaming the rights to really attach them to a narrative. Do we see a lot of that happening in this administration? Yes, we do. Do we see a loss of rights, like people not being able to defend their property, store owners being robbed, and the perpetrators just going free? We see all that. We see just a lawlessness happening. And again, I just look at the border. All of these people just massively storming our border and then being released into the interior of our country and being given money, being put up, being given IDs so now they can go vote. I mean, it's just insane. And this demand that anyone who does have wealth, this demand that they distribute it among people who haven't worked for it. We're seeing more and more and more of that under the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. So how would we grade this president on limited government and on individual freedom? Right now, I'd give him a big fat F. Absolutely. So no matter how you feel about a president, as far as his personality or any of that, what we have to do is look at the policies. Do the policies uphold these 7 values? Do they uphold the load-bearing walls of our country, or are they taking a hammer to them? That's what we have to look at. So we're going to do more of this over the next several days. We're going to break down 2 at a time, and one day I'm going to spend one full podcast on human dignity alone, because it's going to require an entire show on its own. But I hope this is helpful for you. Don't get wooed in by all the talk around compassion and unity and all that. The church needs to unite 100%, but we are not going to ever be in unity with people who are mocking and basically spitting on our Christian worldview. What we have to do is we have to win them to it. And this is what I talk about all the time. There's some people we're never going to reach, but the majority of America is still wanting, the majority of America does want the America that we once knew and loved back. And there's never been a better time for us to influence and win those people to our values than right now. So don't look at this as a doom and gloom thing. Look at this as an incredible opportunity. When these people, that the independents, even the left-leaning people that are still somewhat moderate, we have an opportunity like never before to win them to our values. So let's not blow it by being ugly, by being, um, you know, self-righteous, by being harsh or hard-hearted. Instead, let's use all the Lady Up America concepts that we talk about. And again, I invite you to download the app and go deeper in this, learn these values, learn how to become a masterful influencer so that we can gracefully and genuinely win people to our values, help them see for themselves the failure of this presidency, and win them to the polls in November to change the course of the direction of our country right now. We can do it, especially we moms. All right, let me pray for you. Father God, I thank you so much for giving us clarity in these times of confusion right now, Lord. I pray over this precious woman who's listening to me right now, Lord, that you would root all of this information today deeply into her heart, that you would give her confidence, Lord. You would give her the ability to not only repeat, the lessons from this, but also, Lord, to be able to influence with them. We know as moms, we have incredible superpowers when it comes to influence. And Lord, I ask you to activate them in all of us. Help us to win people to your values, Lord, so that you would heal our land. And Lord, also, while we're doing that, in our efforts to do that, help us to also remember that you are the one who does the winning. We are just there to serve as your ambassador. So help us to do that well, Lord, and in a way that pleases you and in a way that brings you glory. We love you and we honor you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we got this. We got it. I'll look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow. We'll break down 2 more. Share this with a friend, if you will. And again, go get the Lady Up America app so you can get deeper and deeper into these values and become incredibly masterful among your circle of friends and family. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Lady Up.
Lady up around this town. Lady up around this town. Victory on the battle.